let's talk about another elf. So, time to talk about Licht, who is, well, he was the leader of the elf tribe about 500 years ago when everything happened with the massacre of the elves. He was also married to Tetia, who was a human royal. She was pregnant, so they have children. And he's also one of the elves that gets reincarnated when everything happens during the war with the elves in Black Clover. He's also the one who Patri pretends to be initially when everything is going on with the Eye of the Midnight Sun. So there's a lot that kind of goes on with Lich, because he's kind of like a central character in certain regards for certain aspects of what happens in the flashbacks of the elf massacre and everything, and then also just kind of central in regards to like some other bits down the line. And he's kind of, the father of Soul type of a thing. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot there for Licht. So, first of all, Licht, as I said, he was the leader of the elf tribe. 500 years ago, he's the one that, makes the friendship with Lumiere and falls in love with Tetia and wants to try to make it so that way humans and elves can, live together peacefully. Yeah, that unfortunately didn't go well, not through any fault of Licht, but through the manipulations of a devil. So yeah, we'll get to that. So at the age of his death, Licht was 25 years old, and we don't really get too much in regards to like some of it. So going into Licht's biography, he's born in the elf village. He grows up alongside Veto and Fauna and Raya and such. And when he becomes of age, he receives a 4-leaf grimoire, and that shows that he has a lot of potential there, because it's the same way that gets his 4-leaf grimoire and such. One of the things that we do get with the elves, or get with Licht in regards to like interacting with the other elves, is that that he wants to make it that humans and elves can be friends someday, that they can work with each other and learn to understand each other, because he doesn't like this animosity that like the elves both kind of fear to a degree and hate the humans, mostly fear, and are like scared and such of the humans, and then the humans don't like the elves for various reasons that we never get the full answer to, because it's just manipulated by the demon, by the devil, by Siegfried. I mean, not everything is manipulated by him in that regard. He causes the seeds of fear and jealousy within the humans, within the human royals, for the elves' magic to convince the humans to attack them. It's not that there was nothing there to begin with and then he just made them do it. It's no, he like fans the flames of like the hate that's there. And Lich just wants to try to have it that they can live together peacefully, where they understand each other and everything along those lines. And throughout the course of like the Eye of the Midnight Sun arc, we get some flashbacks from some of the other characters that are parts of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, in regards to remembering Licht. And then, because Patri looks so much like the Lich, they kind of like go along with him being Licht because he has a lot of this knowledge. And then eventually it's like, no, you're not Licht, you're Patri, type of a thing. But continuing on with Licht, as I said, he receives his 4-leaf grimoire, and he ends up having, I believe he has wind magic, I think is what they have him have, if I'm remembering correctly. And what happens is that around the same time frame or so, or maybe a bit later, several years later after he receives his grimoire, he ends up saving a human woman, this is Tetia, from a magical tornado that was like created. I don't remember if it's just like her power goes out of control and makes the tornado happen or what, but he saves her. And instant, like, there we go. There's the romance. There's the romance in the backstory. That's there. And, then he also meets Tetia's brother, who is Lumiere Silvermillion Clover, who is, of course, one of the, royals of the human kingdom. And, Tetia is as well. So technically her name would be like Tetia Silvermillion Clover, I believe would be what her name is. Would be her full name, but I guess it's never actually confirmed. And the three of them actually start to develop a very good friendship. Licht and Tetia start to fall in love, and Licht and Lumiere just start to become like the best friends. And Lumiere is like, yeah, I want to try to make things better. I want to try to make it that I like your idea of wanting to have humans and elves live together peacefully and everything. And I went over that when I talked about Lumiere in his video as the Wizard King. But, so there's this whole bit there where it's just like they both have like the same idea of wanting to try to make things better in this regard. Unfortunately, that doesn't end up happening because, things are going great. Licht and Tetia, they fall in love and they conceive twins, and Tetia is just so happy that, maybe this will hopefully help unite the two people. And on the day of her and Licht's wedding, of Tetia and Licht's wedding, that's when the massacre happens. There's a group of human royals who show up and massacre the elves and steal their magic for themselves. And as I stated with the pottery video, I can't really argue with pottery being angry about what happened or argue with the elves being angry about what happened to them. They were massacred for doing nothing to the humans, and out of fear and jealousy and hatred. And it's not their fault. That does not give them the right to do what they did later and try to destroy all of the Clover Kingdom. But it's like you can't keep retaliating there back and forth. It doesn't work. It does not make the situation any better. And what ends up happening is, during the massacre, Tetia is badly injured and she's dying, and she's in Licht's arm, and he's looking around watching as his friends and family and his people are being massacred around him. And his the woman he just married, who is the love of his life and the mother of his children, is there, and she's dying in his arms. And he just nobody would blame him if he snapped in that moment, and he kind of does. But what ends up happening is, because when he kind of starts to snap, it's because, he's the only one that survives, because Zagreed, the devil, is like, that was his plan, is that Licht survives, sees everything, and that is supposed to corrupt his grimoire, and will make it that then Zagreed can use the grimoire as his own, and then that will also corrupt Licht's body and turn him into a dark elf, like what happens much later on, 500 years later, with pottery, as I went over in his video. And what happens is, Licht almost goes down this path. His grimoire does get corrupted, so Zagreed can take that, but he's not quite able to, Licht is able to pull himself back from going fully corrupted and everything along those lines. And, he recovers enough to prevent that. And he is able to calm down because he realizes that Lumiere was not involved in this. Because he had initially thought, because it's the Clover Kingdom royals attacking them, that like, oh, what if Lumiere is part of this as well? And he's able to figure out that that's not the case. And unfortunately, he can't quite stop the corruption of his body. So what happens is Licht uses the magic stones that he was wearing as like part of his wedding getup or whatever it was, and he uses those to transform himself into a demon, which is the giant monster that we see then later on. Its skull is like petrified outside of, Hajj village, and such. As part of the demon that attacked them in the origin of the Wizard King story. And what happens is, so it's like this whole thing of, it goes along, it's the playing on the trope of like in, a lot of mythology or something along those lines, or even in comic book origin stuff. It's like sometimes the good guy has to fight their friend who's been corrupted or has been turned evil or whatever the case may be. And what happens in this case is Licht starts to transform into the demon, into the devil form that he, turns himself into, so that way Zagreed cannot possess his body. As this is happening, he's still mostly in control of his own mind and his own body, but he is going to start going on a rampage soon because he'll lose, control there. And what happens is, this is when Lumiere shows up. He sees what happened, sees that, what his friend has been turned into, and he realizes that the only way to end this madness is to unfortunately kill Licht. And he does, and it's not something that he wants to do with a happy smile on his face. He's sad about it because he's having to attack his best friend and his now brother-in-law, since the wedding did happen. And he attacks, and Licht is defeated, and he's killed. But what happens is that Seker comes in, and she uses the stones to seal Licht's mind into it seals Lumiere's mind and body into the statue atop the skull of the demon thing that Licht turned into, so that way Lumiere can be revived later, as we see later on. And she also uses her power to lock away Licht's soul, so that way it won't be corrupted anymore. And then 5 centuries later, 500 years later, when Patri is reincarnated into William's body, he realizes that he looks like Licht, and he can use that to his advantage, and he, builds up the Eye of the Midnight Sun to try to finish the reincarnation of the elves, because he believes that that was part of Licht's plan, because he thinks that Licht is the one that set up the reincarnation spell for the elves to be reincarnated inside of the bodies of, different residents of the Clover Kingdom. Now, as I said with the Patri video, that's not true. That's Zagreed is the one that did that and has been manipulating him throughout this whole process. And one of the things, of course, is that they have Sally, who is able to create different artificial bodies. She makes one for Veto and one for Fauna, and she also makes one that would be for Licht. And that allows, when Patri releases, finishes the reincarnation thing, so all of the elf souls will, return to, will be able to take control of the bodies of the humans that they are residing in. That happens, Licht's soul is, reawakened, and it is put inside, or it reincarnates inside one of the artificial bodies. And, this allows, him to awaken. But he's not fully back yet. And what happens is, while this is going on, that's when the Royal Knights are attacking the elf base and everything. So it's like some of them are now actually the elves, and so there's, going back and forth against each other. And, so they're all awakened, and that includes Licht, partially awakened inside of this artificial body, and he does have kind of access to some of his power. And what happens is, there's like a bunch of different things that happen at the same time, because Licht is kind of back, and the other elves are all like in control of the other bodies and everything like that. And now they really, and they figured out that, okay, so the grimoire that Asta has is actually the corrupt version of the grimoire that Licht used to have, and we need to get that back from him and give it to Licht. And what happens is, Raya, who's the elf that can like shapeshift and whatnot, takes, he brings Asta to where Licht is, and he doesn't seem to react the way that they expected to, like a human using his grimoire and his swords. But what happens is, during this time frame, Klaus, who is, possessed elf, and Hammond, who is another possessed elf, end up getting defeated. And seeing that reminds, the part of Licht's mind that's there of the massacre, and that causes him to, save his brethren. And then he literally just like goes over to where Asta, so fast goes over to Asta, where Asta and are, grabs the swords that Asta had, and then make them his own again. And he's able to, use his swords again. He has like his swords returned to him. And, all of this is going on that results in him fighting against Asta and and them, clashing back and forth. And, we have these moments where, is able to counter stuff, and then, Asta is, trying to get himself a new sword in this regard. And other various things that are happening during this time frame. And eventually, they're kind of like knocked down, and then, a bunch of the elves, go up to the surface where they have like the giant, where they're gonna do like the summoning for the what is it, the apostles of Seraphri, or whatever it's called, that they're going to use to like finish awakening the elves a little bit more, and then allow them to make the Shadow Palace to summon demons. I don't know. They're being manipulated. Patri is still being manipulated to a degree by Zagreed, so, he's not quite in his right mind at that point in time. And, there's, several things that happen at the same time. Zagreed appears, reveals what actually is going on, that he's been manipulating, Patri from the beginning, and everything along those lines. And of course, there's like other clashes that happen between Licht and and Asta and stuff like that, and other magic knights that show up and try to help and everything. And they go back and forth, and Licht even is trying to fight against Zagreed, but Licht still is not at full power. And eventually what happens is, of course, Lumiere and Seker show up, and Seker unseals the rest of Licht's soul, so he's able to fully awaken back into, this artificial body, and have his full mind and memories and everything back. And that allows him to remember that, no, Lumiere was not the one that betrayed me. It was this devil, and now I have all of this memory back. And yes, I still miss Tetia, but there's more important things going on right now that I have to deal with. And he's able to then, have his full power back as well. And that results to where we have Licht, Lumiere, Asta, Patri, and Seker all fighting together against Zagreed, along with, other elves and other members of the Magic Knights that are there, showing up and working together to try to fight against Zagreed and, his powers. And they are eventually able to defeat Zagreed, with all of them working together. And we get, some great kind of combo attack stuff, or group fighting and stuff like that during this time frame. But eventually they are able to finally defeat him and, just destroy him. And, and I think it's Licht's magic that is able to actually defeat him. So I like that. After that, there is where, so it's again and again and again, they finally get him knocked down and taken care of, and, fully defeated. And there ends up being, after this is done, and, Licht's, all the elves, it's, the elves have realized that their vendetta against the humans was wrong, and Patri is like, I screwed up, I'm sorry, and is like apologizing for it and everything. And what ends up happening is that is when Licht reveals that, like, him working with William, with the two of them combining their powers together, along with Asta, should be able to exorcise all of the elves' souls from the rest of the humans that were possessed by them. And they do, and they're able to work together to release all of them. And that allows all of the elves to finally pass on, including Licht. But he has like one other thing where he he says goodbye to Fauna and Raya and Veto and to Patri and everything. And like Licht isn't necessarily mad at Patri for what he did, for like trying to use his image and such as like a way of having the others follow him in this regard. And so we have a bunch of that stuff that happens, and he even goes to talk to Yuno, and he's like, he thanks Yuno for the fact that allowed him to fight alongside his son, because it's like revealed that Yuno's soul, because like Yuno is an elf reincarnated, and it's supposed to be that like he's the soul of the child that Licht and Tetia would have had, that Tetia was pregnant with 500 years ago when she died, and that soul reincarnated inside of Yuno. And that's why he has like the elf boost powers and everything, but he doesn't like fall under the control of an elf because it was a baby. And so so Licht thanks him for allowing him to fight alongside his son in that regard. And then he also gives Asta, the grimoire back, because now Asta has made the grimoire his and everything. And then he passes on with the others. His body, his artificial body, gets taken over by Patri because Raids, who's like the wizard who can like, I don't know, bring bodies back to life, like forces Patri's soul to go back into Licht's artificial body, so that way he can repent for his sins and everything, I guess. And what also the last really reference that we get to Licht necessarily is that later on, when Noel and Seker and some of the other magic knights, during one of the battles with the Spade Kingdom, when they show up, they end up showing up in Elysia, which is where like the some of the elves have like settled, where like Patri and Veto and Fauna and Raya and such have settled, and they are looking after two like twin niflings who are supposed to be the children of Tetia and Licht. And I'm like, I don't know if that's supposed to be that like they were reincarnated there, I don't know exactly how that's supposed to work, but it's supposed to be that like they're watching over the two children and taking care of them. That's about what we get there. So it's like, so does that mean that they're technically Yuno's siblings? I don't know. That's left up for debate. But that's basically where Licht stuff ends. We don't really have any other story information about him. I'm going to go over some of his like magic, because he's got his so his main magic is like sword magic, and he has the ability to generate swords, which is kind of cool. And he has so many of his various different types of attacks that he has: origin slash, orbital slash barrage. He can do demon. He has his because he is his power is the origin for Asta's power, because his grimoire is what ends up being Asta's grimoire later on, 500 years later. And so he has like the Demon Dweller sword, and he has these other swords that are like the same swords that Asta ended up having, except Asta's are anti-magic swords that have been changed. And so there's like a bunch of that stuff that like Licht is able to control. So it's like some stuff that's a little similar to what Asta can do, but not exactly the same. You know, he can create and control and manipulate swords. As I said, his grimoire is his main thing. You know, he's got, you know, his 4-leaf grimoire, which turns into the 5-leaf grimoire when it's, you know, corrupted and everything. And he has his demon dweller sword and his demon destroyer sword, and demon slayer sword and everything. So there's all of those things that, like, later on get turned into what Asta has and what Asta is able to use in his fights and everything. So there's a bunch of that stuff that gets brought up there. There's not too much else there with Licht. I mean, I don't necessarily think that we're going to get anything else with him. Mostly just because of the fact that he's left. He's, you know, gone off to the next life and everything with the rest of, with the, you know, most of the rest of the elves and everything. Supposedly with, like, Tetia and Lumiere and such, since they were able to pass on. Well, Tetia had been able to pass on in the first place, but, you know, Lumiere has now been able to pass on, as has, you know, Licht. So it's like they're able to be, you know, reunited with Tetia. But it's also like, I'm not exactly sure if they plan on bringing it's like they can't really bring him back, because if they could, I have the feeling that, you know, just as a way as, like, messing with the others, that, like, if he could have, that Julius, or not Julius, that Lucius would have brought them back as paladins or something like that, but he can't. So I don't know if that only applies to humans, that he can turn into paladins, or what, because I think all of the paladins that we've seen so far are all humans that he's, you know, corrupted the way that he did with, you know, sister, you know, with the sister. So I don't really think we're going to get anything else with Licht. I mean, I liked Licht. I liked his character design. I, you know, would have liked a little bit more, you know, info about him at times, but that's what I got. I don't have anything else for this one. I think, I'm trying to think. I think I've gone through most of the other rulers and leaders that are in Black Clover. I still have to do the Dark Triad and then Lucius. I still have to do them, but I kind of want to wait and do Lucius once we get more of, like, a finished up thing of, like, okay, this is what happens with him after the story is finished, and, like, he's, you know, defeated or whatever by Asta and, you know, working together or whatever the case may be. But I still got the other 3 I got to work on, but we'll see how that lands with stuff. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day. Bye.